Hello and thank you for joining us. Elon Musk is doubling down on his threat, demanding federal workers explain what they did last week or lose their jobs. It started on Saturday when federal workers got an email from the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM, asking for 5 bullet points detailing their accomplishments by 11:59 p.m. Monday. Musk posted on his social media platform X, quote, "Failure to respond will be taken as a resignation." Some federal agencies told staff to ignore the email, and OPM officials later said it's up to each department to determine how they want to handle it. Despite that, Musk wrote this Monday night about workers who did not respond, quote, "Subject to the discretion of the president, they will be given another chance. Failure to respond a second time will result in termination." He did not give a new deadline. President Trump was asked in the Oval Office Tuesday if federal workers could be fired.
If they don't write back, they end up eventually losing their job. We give them extensions, but, you know, that was something we thought about a long time ago. We give them extensions, but we'll see. We have to make sure, number one, that we have people, number two, that they're working, and number two, they're working for us, not for another company.
Earlier Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed Musk will take part in Wednesday's cabinet meeting at the White House. She also revealed Musk is not the administrator of the Independent Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. The White House says Amy Gleason is the acting DOGE administrator. She's a former official with the U.S. Digital Service, which President Trump renamed to the U.S. DOGE Service on Inauguration Day. CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro and CBS News Executive Director of White House and Politics Coverage Finn Gomez both join us now. So, Aaron, you heard President Trump say that employees will lose their jobs. The administration also said it's up to department heads. So what's the understanding right now of this DOGE directive?
Lindsay, good to be with you. Just to kind of lay out the timeline, as you mentioned, yesterday, OPM said it's up to each agency to make the eventual decision on what happens to people who did not respond. Caroline Leavitt, again, punted, said it's up to the agency heads. What I took as what Trump said is that he's directing federal agency heads to potentially terminate these workers who do not respond. Again, he seems to insinuate there are federal employees who, quote, do not exist, perchance by looking at people who don't respond and saying they don't exist. Again, he has not given any clear, concrete proof of this, but it's a clear directive from the president to these federal agency heads to potentially terminate these employees. We could see more on this tomorrow during the first cabinet-level meeting, where we also heard Caroline Leavitt say that Elon Musk would take part in that first cabinet meeting.
Then Elon Musk will take part in tomorrow's White House cabinet meeting. He's not a part of the cabinet. He's not actually the DOGE administrator. So how does the White House characterize his role, and does Musk have the authority to make decisions about the federal government?
You know, Lindsay, Leavitt was asked repeatedly during the White House briefing today whether Elon Musk is the administrator of DOGE, as you said, and she repeatedly said that Musk is overseeing DOGE, but did not directly say who that administrator was. And as you said, a White House official confirms that the acting DOGE administrator is Amy Gleason, as you said. And earlier today, our colleague Michael Kaplan, reached out to her, and she said that she was currently in Mexico when she was reached by phone. Gleason joined the office during the transition period when it was still USDS. Sources tell CBS News. And it also came as a surprise to some in the unit who learned of her position, her elevation to this role just in the last few hours. Listen, Lindsay, it's unclear if Musk has the technical authority to make these decisions, but it is clear that he has been empowered by this president to lead this effort. But how far does his authority extend? That is the question. But, you know, if you look at the public face of DOGE, who's tweeting about DOGE, who is meeting with the president in the Oval Office about DOGE, it is one person, and that's Elon Musk.
So that's the public face. But, Aaron, 21 federal technology workers who were absorbed into DOGE at the start of the administration have resigned. Who are these workers, and why did they quit?
These were workers that were part of this office when it was known as the United States Digital Service, which acted as somewhat of an IT wing for the federal governmental agencies, as well as helping them when it comes to implementing technology in some of their efforts. So in a sense, they are holdovers. They are not what we heard of these 20-year-old new software engineers that have been going into federal agencies behind closed doors. In a letter obtained by CBS News, they said that they were resigning because they disagree with the new mission of the newly renamed DOGE. They said they will not use their skills as technologists to compromise core government systems, jeopardize American sensitive data or dismantle critical public services, end quotes. And while a lot of them, all of them actually, signed this letter anonymously, some of their positions were shown, including the fact that a good amount of them were engineers. So these were employees that were about to be integrated into Elon Musk's effort with DOGE, and as engineers would kind of be the ones to handle the mechanical, technical aspect of the cuts they're looking to implement.
Finn, President Trump was also asked about meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and a potential deal on rare earth minerals. What did he say about that?
Well, Lindsay, he did say, he did indicate to reporters just a little while ago that he believes that Zelensky will be visiting the White House on Friday, and they're close to finalizing a minerals deal. He said, quote, certainly it is okay with me if he'd like to. The deal has been discussed, which has been discussed, is designed to allow the U.S. to tap into some of Ukraine's immense mineral wealth. These are our minerals that are in everything from mobile phones to semiconductors. And Trump has argued that these minerals in a deal could yield billions of dollars for American companies and could help recoup some of the costs of the U.S.'s support for Ukraine during the Russia war, which happened just about 3 years ago this week when Russia started the war by invading Ukraine. Lindsay.
Aaron, what else can you tell us about the executive orders that the president signed Tuesday and also any other news that he made in the Oval Office?
Well, one of them is instructing his Commerce Secretary to investigate the impact of tariffs on copper imports. White House officials argued that the U.S.'s reliance on imports of copper, despite having notable copper reserve in our own country, could be harmful towards national security, as they know that a lot of military planes, vehicles use copper in their manufacturing. Another order suspends security clearances for those who work for the Covington and Burling law firm and staff who had worked with special counsel Jack Smith, who had investigated President Trump when it came to January 6th, as well as his handling of classified documents.
And Finn, quickly, what did the president say regarding a potential gold card as opposed to green card?
Yeah, Lindsay, this is it's somewhat like a green card, right? He's calling it green card plus privileges, essentially for people who want to come and gain residency in the United States. They'll get a gold card, but they have to have $5 million to invest in the United States to create jobs. Lindsay.
Finn Gomez, Aaron Navarro, thank you both.